to sort of add to the pressure as well, Alana was now, when I left, she was 8 months pregnant, with our first child. And so I was worried, is there any work out there? Because I hadn't planned to leave. Yeah. Is there going to be any work out there? How am I going to support the family? And, without sounding like Liam Neeson, with our particular skill sets, we tend to go into the security sector. But in the security sector, I did a little bit of research while I was waiting on my operation. Me and my wife, went away and did a close protection course when I was in SF. But a friend of mine, he worked and he said, well, the biggest money is in corporate close protection. The security industry isn't risk reward ratio balanced. Yeah. You could be an Afghan in Iraq, on 50% of the money the guys are on in 5-star hotels or on super yachts. So I was like, well, I'll follow the money. So I went and did a corporate CP course with Alana. She did surveillance courses as well. And then, when I got out, a lot, the anti-piracy thing was still at its height. And a few of my friends from the SBS had their own companies. I didn't want to be competing with them. I didn't want to go Afghan in Iraq. So focus on that corporate bit. My first job within 48 hours is helping set up the British Embassy in Benghazi during the Arab Spring. So this is May 2011 now. So as soon as I got there, boots on the ground, representing this company, soon identified that the Libyans didn't want it to be another Afghanistan in Iraq. Gaddafi was still alive at this point. He's in Tripoli, the city surrounded. So once Gaddafi had fallen, they wanted to take control of the country. Didn't want private security companies walking around with weapons. But then I'm sat in this hotel, and there's NGOs there, there's oil and gas, and there's some of the biggest private security companies out there. I always call them the big five. And I was listening to some of their directors and managers winning these bids and then over-promising crisis management and evacuation plans, which weren't actually in place. I was like, that's not in place, So I flew back from that trip. Alana gave birth to Molly, and I said, look, I've got a plan. So there's a huge proliferation of weapons at this time because it's, it was still accessible before Gaddafi had fallen. So I went back in and I bought 30 weapons on the black market and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt and designed my own evacuation plans, put some comms kit in there, put money in there and just left them and just obviously spent a month just burying them in the desert. We lived in Aberdeen, which is like the oil and gas capital of Europe. It's like the Houston of Europe. So we had access, my wife's from Aberdeen, we had access to some of the oil subsidiary companies. And so I was selling this concept to them, and some of them were giving it as a retainer. Hopefully never needed to use it. But each phone call I was getting was a different task. It was a different country. And so I was learning a lot about the security industry. I sort of joke when you tell people you're in the security industry and you look like the way you are, they think you're a doorman from the local nightclub. And it's like, well, no, the security industry is very, very diverse. You have surveillance, close protection, coaching, mentoring, maritime, cyber. It's a big old beast. And so for me, I was learning so much about the security industry in a short period of time. Each phone call was different. One, I was training the Kurdish Special Forces to fight ISIS. The next one, I'm taking the UAE Royal Family super yacht from Barcelona to the Maldives. Then we London Olympics, the Brazil Soccer World Cup. There was all these different areas. But I just finished the London Olympics, 6 weeks in London, which was great. And I tended to find that every time I had a good task, I ended up having a bad task. And I was in Benghazi, September 11th, 2012, and I see, obviously, Ty's bracelet on there. So I get a phone call, and there's a German oil company called KCA Deutag who were there. And at this point, it was on the evening of September 11th. No one knew what was going on. And they're like, Dean, can you get this oil company from Benghazi back to Tripoli? I said, yeah. So I turned up, picked up these eight German engineers. And what I did is I had a safe house in Zella. So rather than going straight from Benghazi to Tripoli, which is the coastal road, what people don't understand, in Libya, I have like 167 tribes. And so I can't take drivers from Benghazi to Tripoli. You've got to go through Misrata and Tripoli, and that will cause issues in itself. And so I had a safe house in Zella. We drove them out to Zella. It's about 5 miles southwest of Benghazi, safe enough out there. And we just stayed there for 36 hours, by which time we could see everything unfolding on the news. Now realize actually what had happened, because at that point we didn't know what was going on. But during that period, I had drivers coming in from Tripoli, but I couldn't tell the drivers from Benghazi because they would just leave. And I remember the morning that the drivers arrived, it was like the OK Corral. You know, the Benghazis had their pistols out, the people from Tripoli, and they were arguing. And I said, look, and I sat them down. I said, look, I cannot take you to Tripoli. That's going to be an issue, and you don't want to come either. And they're like, no. I said, so, no, these drivers are going to take us. They were worried about whether they were going to get their money. So, I paid them. Them guys went, and then we went to Tripoli. So that was a success.
How did you line up a safe house there?
So when I was doing the caches, I identified safe houses in different areas, and that's pretty much where my caches are. So the caches are next to safe houses. So again, with Libya, you've got so many tribes and so many different people. So I have a number of fixers. So a fixer is someone who's a local who can get you stuff that you need. And so my fixer, for example, in Tripoli, you know, his cousin was the president of the GNC, which is the new government, and he's from the West, but I couldn't use him in Benghazi. So I had equivalents in different areas. And so they would identify safe houses for me that we could use and be able to utilize up to 72 hours. So when you're doing evacuations, if there's an issue, you have safe house options along the route.
But how are you identifying who your fixers are? Like, how are you identifying the safe house? Is it something where you're renting it for a month, or like logistically, how are you pulling that off?
Yeah, so identifying the fixers is quite difficult. There has to be an element of trust. You know, you can't, you know, for me with some of these countries that I go into, I literally go on, I sometimes work on my own, and I just work on personal skills. And so you have to put an element of trust into these people. And for them, actually, believe it or not, the safe houses are just normal people's houses. So they didn't really want retainers. They just wanted to know, you know, we'll talk about some of the other evacuations. Everyone's quite quick to tarnish certain communities with one brush because certain incidents, for example, like 9/11 with the Muslim community. But a lot of the most hospitable people I've seen, they don't like terrorists, you know, and so they just want to help you. So there's a couple of countries where I've had to pay retainers, just because strategically they're places that we want, but most of them were just doing it pro bono.
And if you are doing a retainer, what kind of money is that?
You know, for them, I'm getting retainers from the oil company. So, you know, it could be like $1,000 a month, which is huge for them. Yeah. Okay. But that's also to make sure that there's food and water in place and,
right.
and things like that. And then we have drivers as well.
Wow. All right. So you get them out, no problem, no issues along the way. No
issues along the way. Like I said, you know, I think, you know, other companies may have just taken that coastal road and panicked. And so for us, it was a bit longer, but it was the right decision. You know, I always joke that when people speak about special forces, you know, Hollywood doesn't help matters. You know, Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham. It's all about the offensive action. I call it the biceps, the bullets, and the bombs. Yeah. But that's 25% of what we do in SF. But 50% of what we do is hearts and minds, support and influence. And so that's what I've really targeted on here is understanding the demographics, the politics, and the tribal influences of the countries that I go into. And so when I go in initially, you know, I sit down, meet fixers, and really get them to explain to me the history of the country, the issues when it comes to tribals and stuff like that, and get a real understanding of the country myself and understanding the atmospherics. I remember going to Somalia once and flew in on my own, and I ended up meeting this gentleman. So everyone was at the airbase, and I just walked out the airport, went to the nearest hotel. It was called the Peace Hotel, and ended up meeting a gentleman who we ended up doing business with, and he's actually from London. But I sat down with him and his family, and he said, look, I get emails all the time from security companies all around the world wanting to do business, but you've come here, you've taken the risk, you understand, you know, I call it the media monster. The media monster doesn't help the matter with some of these places. But understand that, yes, they're not naive to think there's not places of risk. It's like anywhere, but it's not as bad as the world's making out. So that's what I do. I sort of build those relationships and try and learn as much about the country as possible. And that helps me with my planning as well.
Yeah.